I've been in a little bit of an asymmetric power tussle. So you'll forgive the little Band-Aid here, but you should see the other guy. You should see the other guy. I might be skinny.
The other guy
might be,
is plural.
But hey, I won. I won asymmetric power. So here we go. So I think this episode, Dr. Emily Brearley is going to discuss with us her truly fantastic meeting with Mauricio Claver-Carone, the Special Envoy for Latin America, and what was so interesting and enlightening about it. And let's kick it off and take it from there. So what are the plans for the Trump administration vis-a-vis Latin America?
Well, Vanessa, what was so interesting about the talk that was given yesterday in Miami at Miami-Dade College is that it was extremely upbeat. It came on the heels of this big tariff bonanza announcement, which the globe is collectively losing its mind over. Quite annoyingly, in a lot of the press, it says, economists think this is awful. You know, my classic tagline is that economists don't think. We have a toolkit and we have lots of different ideas about tariffs. And what Claver-Carone's idea is that it's good news for Latin America. Latin America came out with the lowest tariff at 10%, almost uniformly across the region, apart from obvious exceptions like Nicaragua and Venezuela. But really...
And that point of yours, sorry to interrupt, is actually repeated by the America Society and Council of the Americas, which is, as you know, the longest standing sort of business community in the Western Hemisphere. They emphasized that the rest of the world had higher tariffs, but Latin America, in effect, got preferential treatment, except for, the egregious dictatorships in the region.
Right. And, were this not attached to the Trump administration, it would sound very much like what a Keynesian economist like me was saying during and after COVID. The lessons that we learned is that we don't want to be dependent on these very long and tenuous Asian supply chains. We want to reshore back to the region and the Americas. We want to trade with our wonderful partners in Latin America. This is a huge opportunity for them to really boost their manufacturing and their economic growth, and to diversify those supply chains with countries that are friends and allies. So that was really the strong message that came yesterday, and I found it quite compelling as somebody who's lives in the region and works in the region.
So can I just press you a little bit on that and pick your economist brain? Because, for instance, I know Monterrey, Mexico very well. And, Monterrey, Mexico is basically almost like a suburb of the United States. In that, you have a lot, the heavy car manufacturing is actually, a lot of it is finalized in Monterrey. There's a very heavy industrial base in Monterrey that relied on NAFTA and then USMCA, which was renegotiated by Trump 1 in his first administration, and so much so that the main gas pipeline from the U.S. into Mexico goes through Monterrey. So it's really a transnational economic region, and Monterrey is the economic industrial powerhouse of all of Mexico, right? Southern Mexico is very poor. This Monterrey is particularly wealthy because it has this cross-border relationship. But automotive and other things are very, and heavy industry is really across the border for the U.S. So how do you see this playing out in practice as an economist?
I mean, I've been having such intense debates with my fellow economists, because I say we come in all different flavors and have our own personal opinions with a similar toolkit. I mean, you can say equally that there will be chaos in the short term because tariffs are a big blunt instrument, and to levy a 25% tariff is very shocking. and markets don't like shocks, and they don't like they like incremental change. At the same time, if you're someone like me who rather liked the Evo Morales quip that el capitalismo es nada más de consumir basura, capitalism is nothing more than consuming rubbish, plastic rubbish, then
Right.
you rather like the idea of less consumption, better quality, local markets, trading with neighbors. So I think we can all be right at the same time, and only time will indeed tell. But I don't see chaos. I see a rather exciting opportunity to really help Latin America. And there was a lot of talk by Mauricio, who of course is Cuban American, that these are partners and the story
Right.
should not always be immigration. He, in fact, banned his team from talking about the Northern Triangle, which is something that's often invoked. You know, Kamala Harris worked with Ajay Banja, the president of the World Bank, on the Northern Triangle to stop immigration from Guatemala, Honduras, and I think it was El Salvador as the third country in the Northern Triangle. But he said, no, we should treat each country as an individual. They have their own trade desires. They can be our respective partners. So it was a very positive and respectful take that he had on the region as someone from the region and as someone who is to, you know, governments. Even in terms of Mexico, he said that deals can be done and cooperation has vastly increased as compared to under AMLO. Now we have Claudia Sheinbaum. Right. And although the media is saying that there is this clash going on, his message was that, in fact, especially on security, and I'd like to know what you think about this, the cartels being designated terrorist entities. He said that the Mexican political elite understand that these cartels are a threat to their democracy.
Yes.
And they do operate like terrorist organizations. And we do need to do something about it. Right.
They do. I mean, you know, you've seen that, you know, you've seen when they had the like shootout for the son of El Chapo. I mean, they were just they were just outgunned. I mean, the thing is, they're so huge, they're so well funded that they outgun literally the government, and people are afraid, you know. And it's and insofar as you may have peace in your village, it's a pax mafiosa. Right? It's a making a deal with the government, with the cartel that rules you. And I think Sheinbaum has shown her credentials. I mean, even you know, even Trump, who is not renowned for giving huge kudos to our don't call it NAFTA friends, has shown respect for Sheinbaum because she stood up with him. She stood up to him. So anyway, I think that that's great. But there was a point, just to keep pressing on the Council of the Americas, you know, analysis, is that, you know, tariffs need to be part of a broader strategy. They need to be part of an investment into local infrastructure. They need to be part of sustaining innovation within the United States. And then you need to give time to adjust, because if governments, if your partners, your international partners, weren't already doing that, and this is sort of the, you know, the market, the market optimization view, they would already be doing that. So if they're not doing that, you need to give them a reason to optimize by doing that, by supporting, by coming in manufacturing in the United States. So how do you do that? How long will this take, and how much will the pain be for American citizens?
Well, the message on this was very clear, and again, very optimistic, that America needs to get back to equity investing in Latin America, in, you know, useful infrastructure investments. He did quite a good bit of bashing of the IDB and the World Bank, which of course fell delightfully, because that's a bit the groove that I'm sewing right now. But he said that, you know, loan guarantees and concessional finance has become somewhat of a dependency for Latin American governments, and that projects don't get finished. Governments sign, and the building drags on and on and on, and nothing is ever finished. And that's what I've observed, and was my main concern, is simply that these banks don't work. The model is broken. And so Claver-Carone talked about building up again a healthy investment environment where we have productive assets that are great for American investors, that play to the strengths of America's incredibly flexible and enormous financial markets, and pushing aside this old way of doing things with the IFIs, which he says basically suck value out of assets.
Define them for our audience: international financial institutions.
Yeah, like the World Bank, like the IDB. And remember, he was briefly president at the IDB. I had actually just left there, and he came in. And most of my colleagues at the IDB did not like him, which is why I went in to this talk rather skeptical. And he won me over, I have to say. He was delightfully upbeat, an intellect, surely, very respectful of the region, which is something I haven't always seen with the American
absolutely. As we've discussed before, the Western Hemisphere is the poor region, whether you're dealing with DOD or State Department, it's always underfunded, right? So, which has always been a mistake. But I want to hear, so did he talk about what you and I had discussed in a previous podcast? Did he talk about, I think it was our last podcast, about how the USG, the US government, might help de-risk, if you're looking for public-private partnerships and you want, you want American companies to buy, Hutchinson Whampoa's ports, or you want American companies to buy TikTok, or you want American companies to build ports in Latin America, or airports in Latin America, or electrical grids. How did he discuss how USG is going to bring its power to bear to de-risk those investments for the private sector? Because the private sector always looks at a whole map, right? They'd have like, I've got capital and I can deploy it here, there, 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 there. I'm just looking for maximum return for minimum risk. And that's fair enough. That's their job for their shareholders and their stakeholders, and that's correct. So why would they go into some basket case country, right, where they're going to be, possibly liable for FCPA, the project won't be completed, they won't get their return, and by the way, their home government of U.S. government doesn't care about them, right? So there is something to be played. Like, if you want me to go in there, you've got to do something that makes this financially plausible, right?
Right.
You don't have.
Well, Vanessa,
what was
so interesting? Yeah, he didn't say de-risk, but his narrative is essentially that the IFIs have made once logical investments and interesting investments uninteresting to the private sector, which is a very interesting claim, since the World Bank, the IDB are constantly banging on about the fact that they leverage private sector finance, they crowd it in. I don't believe they do. I have seen that they do not. So his contention is that we need to get those guys out of the game of doing, like loan guarantees. The instruments that they're using are actually actively undermining the likelihood of viable and valuable equity investment. So with America Crece, he wants to rebuild the financial environment in the Americas. And, he's basically saying that these are good assets to invest in, these ports, these roads. It's not that the assets are bad. It's the instruments that are currently funding them become very unattractive to the private sector, because the concessional finances have been there and they're pulling back on quality and speed. That for me was a really interesting contention, and it's maybe one step further than I had ever claimed, but I'm certainly pondering it. And I think he made a very good. And obviously what we have right now is not working. I go back to the, China crowding in on investments. And he also made the point that the IFIs are allowing China to come into Latin America, use the concessional finance because they can always offer the lowest bid because they have state-run companies. So they throw money at it. They don't care whether it's actually going to be a profitable investment, but they want the leverage, they want the power. He claimed that there are 99 such projects right now in Latin America funded by the IDB alone. And I've seen Jay Norquist talk about this with the World Bank too, the capture by the Chinese of the bidding process of the IFIs. And that really is a very...
You and I discussed before, the Bridge and Road Initiative for America, right? This was our last podcast. So, yes, it was. So it sounds like MCC, Mauricio Claver-Carone, was discussing this, not using the words, but basically a Bridge and Road Initiative for the U.S. And what about what he said changes your mind, or was an extra bit of data in your thinking, or is something that you would add to our previous views on our previous podcasts?
What was surprising to me is how often I found myself nodding my head. It's very odd to have been thinking things for 25 years with nobody listening to me and screaming in the desert. And now suddenly somebody very unexpected in an administration really, full powering forward, saying the things that I have always thought, but I had expected the Democrats to be saying these things, not the Republicans. It's almost like the Republicans have stolen the march from the Democrats. More reshoring back to the Americas is good for the environment. It's good for working class people. It's good for manufacturing.
It's good for immigration, right? If people want to stay at home, they want to stay at home with their families. They don't want to, cross the Darien Gap or the Rio Grande to get to the U.S. If they have an opportunity to stay home, they will.
Something that he said that I thought was interesting is that he had to admit that sometimes the American people wanted to be lied to, and they went along with the conventional wisdom. He made that point by saying, everybody said that if we let China into the WTO, it would democratize them. Instead, we funded over the decades, the 40 years of China being part of the WTO, we funded the biggest autocracy in the world that is also a threat to the United States. So these same geniuses are challenging the tariff policy. I'm still a little bit scared about the tariff policy just because I think it's a massively blunt hammer. However, I have never been a proponent of untrammeled free trade. I'm a Keynesian economist. I think that obviously markets have been fantastic for pulling people out of poverty. I think the left is a bit too down on markets in general, which is why it's so odd that they hate these tariffs, because you would think that they would like them, because this is a big impediment, a massive impediment to free trade. So I think, I don't know, everybody's gone a bit bonkers, and the left is sounding like the right is sounding like the left. But the end of the story is that I do think this is good for the region. And as MCC said, we have a military, a DOD, we have a White House, and we have a State Department all on the same page, which we haven't had before. We have Marco Rubio is the first Latino Secretary of State, very proud of him.
And we have had a bit of a debate, right, about whether, for instance, as a Venezuelan, as a Venezuelan American, does the appeasement side win, or does the hardline maximum pressure side win? And that's been a debate that's been raging in the last couple of days, in fact. And it turns out that the maximum pressure side is now going to win out. But that wasn't as clear. Yeah.
What do you think about that, Vanessa? Because he reiterated that there were lots of questions, obviously, from Venezuelans, from Cubans, from Nicaraguans, and he said, you can't be half-assed. You know, you got to go all in, and that was his message on that. Do you think that's the right way to go?
I think it is the right way. I mean, it's either a dictatorship that you don't want to fund, or you're funding it. So I think that going with the maximum financial pressure, because Maduro is really not an ideologue. He's really just the head of a criminal organization. So treat it as such. Go after the finances. Go after the managers, the shipping, the personnel recruitment. I mean, we know how to destabilize, criminal organizations. Have been doing it for decades. And, cut off the finances, but then also go after the middle management, because those things are harder to replace. And that's something I had discussed in my book. So I think that that's the way to go. And I think that it's morally and economically coherent.
Right.
And and if the U.S. doesn't need Venezuelan oil, then it doesn't need Venezuelan oil. And just say, we don't need it, but if you want to sell it to us, here are the conditions. Get it out.
So
and basically, Venezuelans, as you and I discussed, one of the things that has allowed Maduro to endure is the fact that the entire freaking opposition has left.
Yes. Yes, he said that too, that we shouldn't just be accepting 10% of the country to come and live in the United States, even though, with all compassion, that just perpetuates the regime. I mean, it's interesting to me, Vanessa, that now we have in America Crece 2.0. Perhaps this is, we were looking for a word for like Belt and Road Americas, and we had our own phrases, but maybe this is it. But in terms of
America Crece.
America Crece, and from the economic lefty tree hugger side, I rather like it. It looks after my beloved Latin America, which is the region closest to my heart. It seems like sensible, good economics to me, despite these hammer throws of the big tariffs. And it seems like on the security side, you're also on board.
No, absolutely. I think there's a lot to track here, and let's see how it develops, and let's see how America Crece continues on. All right, thank you, and I'm really grateful for the comments on and the meeting with Mauricio Claver-Carone. Thank you. All right,
thanks, Vanessa. So, you just you chill out, mate. Don't get in any more fights. I think that the outro music should be The Clash. I fought the law and the law won.
I fought the exactly. I think that's what we should do. I'll do it. I'll put it in there. All right, my darling. All right. Until next time. Okay. Hang on. Thank you. Bye-bye.